Hi, today we'll be diving into the foundations of what photography is, which is the exposure triangle. The exposure triangle consists of just three things: ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. These three things, when it goes hand in hand, will let you take the most exposed, properly lit photo. By knowing these three things, it will really help your photo game. Understanding this is the first step to taking better photos and moving away from auto mode. So we're going to start off with ISO. ISO controls how sensitive your camera is to light. Generally, keeping a lower ISO is always better. Because if you increase the ISO, it will start introducing noise and grain into your image, which you wouldn't find it appealing. So always sticking to a lower ISO is better. But say you're in a low light situation and you don't have much lights around, you don't have sunlight around, and you have to take it in a low light situation, then you opt to increase the ISO. Always look out for the noise and make sure you can just find something, a light, anything whatsoever, just to introduce a little more light from somewhere else, just so that you don't break your image by increasing the ISO too much. With that said, let's hop on to aperture. Aperture is the opening in your lens that controls how much light goes through to the sensor. The wider it opens, the more light goes through. The lesser it opens, the lesser light goes through. You can also think of it like this: your pupil, the more it opens, the more light goes through. The lesser it opens, the lesser it goes through. So say you choose to shoot in f1.8. So f-stop and aperture are the same thing. Say you choose to go through f1.8, that will introduce a lot of background blur and your subject will be perfectly in focus. And let's just say you want to take a scenery, that you will have to shoot say in like f16, so that everything is sharp and in focus and nothing is blurred out. If something is blurred out in those, then it doesn't look very appealing. So it depends on scenario to scenario whether you want to introduce more light into the sensor or not. The last element to the exposure triangle is the shutter speed. Shutter speed is on how fast the shutter opens and closes. A faster shutter speed, like 1,000th of a second, will freeze the motion. Like for sports and whatnot, it's really good. But a slower shutter speed, like 1/10th of a second, will give a little more motion to it. You can also take an example like this. When a water droplet is falling, if you shoot in 1,000th of a second, it will freeze the motion. But if you take it in 1/10th of a second, it will show the motion of the water droplet itself falling down. So by understanding these three, you will have to make sure everything works together. If you increase one setting, you will have to adjust the other two to make sure everything goes hand in hand. You can't just increase one and like everything has to go hand in hand to match your taste on how you want the image to be. If you want the image to be blurry in the background, so then you have to adjust the other two. If you want the image to freeze, then you have to adjust the other two. So you have to choose exactly which is your most prioritized thing you want in these three elements. Choose that and you go with that, and you adjust the other two accordingly. Okay, so if you have a look at this image, the background is focused, so is the subject. So let's just say you want the background to have some separation from the subject, making the background a little more blurred. We can drop the f-stop, the aperture. Now if you see, it's just blown out, it's too bright, and the ISO is high in value, it's up to 2000. So let's drop that as well. Yeah, seems to be right. So in this whole thing, you would have understood that using just these three things, ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, you use it properly. Make sure it's going hand in hand with each other. Make sure each is complementing the other, and always make sure that you have one focus in mind. Say for an example, if you want the background to be blurred as your main priority, then you either increase the shutter speed and decrease the ISO, or it's just you playing around with the three. And it all depends on how you want your image to look like, on what makes you feel that okay, this image is right. So if you look at the image and you're like, this is right, this is what I want, so then that's the correct settings you have to go with. So it's all on your preference. If you feel this is correct, then it is correct, because it's all on your preference on what type of image you want. So with that said, If there's anything more you want to see on this exposure triangle thing, let me know. There's a part 2 coming out on camera basics, which we will learn more on white balance and a couple of other things. So if you're interested, stay tuned and let me know if there's anything else you want to know. Also, for this whole video, I've been looking at some notes, so you can download the notes down in the description below. And yeah, stay tuned.